Have you ever trusted someone completely, only to have that trust shattered in an instant? Today's story is about Jason Mitchell, a successful investment banker who built his fortune through years of careful planning and sacrifice. When a sudden health crisis left him hospitalized for months, his sister Rachel, the only family he had left, made a decision that would change their relationship forever. She sold his house without permission, thinking she was doing what was best for her brother. Little did she know, Jason had been preparing for worst-case scenarios his entire career. His secret offshore accounts were about to turn the tables in a way neither of them could have anticipated. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. Stay with me to find out how Jason discovered his sister's betrayal and how his financial foresight led to an outcome no one expected. I've always believed that true wealth isn't about the money in your bank account, but about the relationships you nurture throughout your life. At least, that's what I told myself until the day I woke up in a hospital bed to discover my own sister had sold my house out from under me. My name is Jason Mitchell. For over 15 years, I worked as an investment banker at Morgan Stanley, in Manhattan. It wasn't the career I'd dreamed of as a kid growing up in rural Ohio, but I had a talent for numbers and a knack for anticipating market trends. By my late 30s, I'd built a comfortable life for myself. A beautiful colonial-style house in Westchester County, a portfolio diverse enough to weather most economic storms, and enough savings to eventually retire early if I wanted. What I didn't have was much family. Our parents died in a car accident when I was 25, and my sister Rachel was just 19. Being the only family she had left, I put her through college and helped her get established in her career as a teacher. We were close, or at least, I thought we were. Rachel was never interested in finance or investing, and her eyes would glaze over whenever I tried to explain my work. She was more concerned with her fourth-grade students, her book club, and her perpetually rocky love life than with building financial security. "Not everyone needs 3 backup plans for their backup plans, Jason," she'd say with that dismissive laugh of hers. I never pushed the issue. In my line of work, I'd seen too many families torn apart by disagreements over money. It was a Tuesday in October when everything changed. I was at my desk reviewing client portfolios when the pain hit, like a vice grip tightening around my chest, radiating down my left arm. At 42, I was too young for a heart attack, or so I thought. I don't remember much about being rushed to New York Presbyterian Hospital. The doctors later told me I'd gone into cardiac arrest in the ambulance. What should have been a straightforward procedure turned into a nightmare of complications. A previously undiagnosed congenital heart defect, a severe reaction to the anesthesia, pneumonia that set in during recovery. One health crisis after another kept me in the hospital for nearly 3 months, much of it in a medically induced coma. Rachel was by my side throughout it all, according to the nurses. She brought fresh flowers every few days, read aloud from my favorite books, and handled all the paperwork that comes with an extended medical emergency. I couldn't have asked for a more devoted sister during that time. When I finally regained consciousness and stability, Rachel was there, clutching my hand with tears streaming down her face. She looked exhausted, with dark circles under her eyes, and her normally neat brown hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. "Thank God," she whispered when I opened my eyes. "The doctors weren't sure if you'd come back to us." Over the next few days, as my strength slowly returned, Rachel filled me in on what I'd missed. It was during one of these conversations that she dropped the bombshell that would change everything. "I had to make some decisions while you were unconscious," she said, nervously picking at a loose thread on her cardigan. Her voice was tentative, lacking its usual confidence. "The medical bills were piling up, Jason. Your insurance covered a lot, but not everything, and the hospital kept asking about payment plans." I tried to sit up straighter in the hospital bed, ignoring the twinge of pain in my chest. "Rachel, I have more than enough in my main savings account to cover medical expenses. You had access to that. She nodded quickly. I know, and I used some of it, but then I started getting calls about your mortgage and property taxes and all these other expenses. The bills just kept coming, and I was so worried about your recovery that I couldn't think straight. A sense of unease began to creep up my spine. What are you saying, Rachel? She couldn't meet my eyes. I sold your house, Jason. I'm sorry. I consulted with a financial advisor, and he said it was the best option. The market in Westchester is hot right now, and we got well above the asking price. It was enough to cover all your medical bills and still have a substantial amount left over. For a moment, I couldn't speak. My house, the home I'd spent years renovating to my exact specifications, with the cherrywood office and the kitchen with the skylight where I drank my morning coffee, was gone, sold without my knowledge or consent. You had no right, I finally managed, my voice barely above a whisper. You had absolutely no right to make that decision. You were in a coma. Rachel's voice rose defensively. The doctors weren't sure you'd ever wake up. What was I supposed to do? Let everything fall apart while I waited? I was trying to protect what I could of your finances. By selling my house? Without even trying to explore other options? The heart monitor beside my bed began beeping more rapidly as my pulse increased. I did what I thought was best with the information I had, Rachel insisted, her chin jutting out stubbornly in that way it had since childhood. The financial advisor said, What financial advisor? Who gave you advice to sell my primary asset? During a medical emergency? Rachel crossed her arms defensively. Gary Hoffman, he's a friend of Steve's. Steve was her on-again, off-again boyfriend, a perpetually underemployed entrepreneur whose business schemes never seemed to materialize into anything substantial. A friend of Steve's, I repeated flatly. So not actually a certified financial planner or someone with any fiduciary responsibility to act in my best interest. He has his own investment company, Rachel shot back, and he didn't charge me anything for the advice. I closed my eyes, trying to contain the anger and disbelief threatening to overwhelm me. Free financial advice from a friend of Steve's. It would be comical if it weren't so devastating. Where are my things? I asked without opening my eyes. In storage. I packed everything carefully, I promise. All your important documents are in a safe deposit box at Chase. And look, I know you're upset, but this isn't as bad as it seems. The house sold for $1.2 million, Jason. After paying off the remaining mortgage and your medical bills, there's still over $700,000 left. That's more than enough to buy another place once you're recovered. I finally opened my eyes to look at my sister. She was trying to smile encouragingly, as if she'd done me a favor rather than violated my trust in the most fundamental way possible. Rachel, I need some time. I can't talk about this right now. Her face fell. Jason, please. I was just trying to help. I know, I said, though I wasn't sure I believed it. But I need time to process this. Could you please go? After she left, I lay in the hospital bed staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. The house was gone. My sanctuary, my investment, my home, sold without my consent. I felt violated, betrayed by the one person I should have been able to trust implicitly. But beneath the shock and anger, another emotion was beginning to surface. Relief. Because there was something Rachel didn't know, something I'd never shared, with her or anyone else outside my most trusted financial advisors. The house in Westchester, while valuable, represented only a small portion of my overall net worth. Over the years, I'd established a network of offshore accounts and investments that Rachel knew nothing about. It wasn't about tax evasion. I always filed proper F-bar forms and paid what I owed to the IRS. It was about security, about having resources that couldn't be easily accessed or liquidated without my direct involvement. After our parents died so unexpectedly, I'd developed a Perhaps unhealthy obsession with financial contingency planning. What if something happened to me? What if I became incapacitated? What if the market crashed again, worse than 2008? These questions led me to create a complex financial structure that would protect my assets under various scenarios. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd planned for nearly every contingency except the one that actually happened: my own sister selling my house while I was unconscious. The next morning, Dr. Eleanor Watkins came by on her rounds. A cardiothoracic specialist in her 50s with short silver hair and kind eyes behind stylish glasses, she'd been overseeing my care since the initial surgery. "Your vital signs are looking much better today," she said, reviewing my chart. "How are you feeling? Physically or emotionally?" I asked with a wry smile. She raised an eyebrow. "Both, ideally." "Physically, I'm sore but improving. Emotionally, I trailed off, not sure how much to share." Dr. Watkins sat on the edge of my bed, something I'd noticed she did with patients when she wanted to have a real conversation, rather than just a clinical exchange. "Your sister mentioned there was some tension yesterday. She's worried about you." I let out a humorless laugh. "Did she tell you why?" "She said she made some financial decisions on your behalf that you're unhappy with. She sold my house without my knowledge or consent." Dr. Watkins's expression remained neutral, professional. "I see. That must be very distressing. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off." That's one way to put it. I shifted uncomfortably against the pillows. "Doctor, when can I get out of here? I need to start sorting out this mess." She frowned slightly. "You've made remarkable progress, but you're still recovering from major cardiac events and complications. Rushing your discharge could lead to setbacks. I understand the risks, but I also need to take control of my situation. Could I at least have access to my phone and laptop? There are calls I need to make, accounts I need to check." Dr. Watkins considered this for a moment. "I don't see any medical reason to restrict your access to technology at this point in your recovery. Just promise me you won't overdo it. Stress isn't good for your heart, especially right now." "I promise to be careful," I said, already mentally listing the people I needed to contact: my attorney, my accountant, my private banker in the Cayman Islands. Later that afternoon, a nurse brought in the personal effects that had been stored since my admission: my wallet, watch, keys to a house I no longer owned, and my smartphone, which was, unsurprisingly, dead after 3 months. "Your sister brought your laptop and chargers yesterday," the nurse said, placing a canvas tote bag on the bedside table. "She said you might want them. An olive branch from Rachel, or an attempt to assuage her guilt. Either way, I was grateful to have my devices back." Once I'd charged my phone and logged into my laptop, I began methodically checking my accounts and emails. The picture that emerged confirmed what Rachel had told me. My primary checking and savings accounts had been significantly depleted. The mortgage on my house had been paid off as part of the sale. My investment portfolio remained untouched, likely because Rachel didn't have access to those accounts. Then I logged into my offshore accounts using the secure VPN I always used for such transactions. Everything was exactly as I'd left it 3 months ago. My Cayman Islands account, my investments in Singapore, the trust in the Channel Islands, all intact, collectively worth nearly 10 times what the house had sold for. I felt a complex mix of emotions: vindication that my contingency planning had paid off, even if not in the way I'd anticipated; lingering anger at Rachel's presumption; and, I had to admit, a sliver of guilt at the realization that I'd never fully trusted my only sister with the truth about my finances. As I was scrolling through months of unread emails, a new message notification appeared. The sender was Gary. "Hoffman, presumably the financial advisor who'd counseled Rachel to sell my house. The subject line, Investment Opportunity for Mitchell Residence Proceeds. I opened it with a growing sense of dread. Dear Mr. Mitchell, it began. First, let me say how pleased I am to hear of your recovery. Your sister Rachel has been keeping me updated on your progress, and it's truly miraculous how you've pulled through such a serious health crisis. As the financial advisor who helped facilitate the sale of your Westchester property, I wanted to reach out directly now that you're on the mend. The proceeds from the sale, approximately $700,000 after expenses and medical bills, are currently sitting in a standard savings account, earning minimal interest. I'd like to propose a meeting to discuss reinvesting these funds in a high-yield opportunity I've been developing with select clients. With your background in finance, I'm sure you'll appreciate the potential returns we're projecting, approximately 18–22% annually, significantly outperforming the market. Rachel mentioned you might be hesitant to work with me given the circumstances of our introduction, but I assure you this investment opportunity is time-sensitive and exclusively available to a small group of investors. I've attached a prospectus for your review. I look forward to the possibility of working together. Best regards, Gary Hoffman, Hoffman Investment Strategies. I opened the attached prospectus, which was nothing more than a poorly formatted PowerPoint presentation about a real estate development project in Florida. No detailed financial projections, no risk assessments, no information about the developer's track records or how returns would be generated. It was, in short, almost certainly a scam. And Rachel had apparently given this man my contact information and told him about the proceeds from my house sale. Picked up my phone and called my attorney, Marcus Baldwin, with whom I'd worked for over a decade. Jason, he answered warmly. It's good to hear your voice. Rachel told me about your condition. How are you feeling? I've been better, I replied. Marcus, did you know Rachel sold my house? A pause. Yes, she consulted me about the legality. She had your power of attorney for healthcare decisions, but it wasn't clear if that extended to financial matters of this magnitude. I advised her to petition for temporary financial guardianship, given your condition, but she said there wasn't time. And you didn't stop her? Another pause, longer this time. Jason, legally I couldn't stop her. I advised caution, suggested alternatives, but ultimately she made the decision. I'm sorry if it wasn't what you would have wanted. I took a deep breath, trying to remain calm. I need your help now, Marcus. I need to understand exactly what happened with the house sale, where the money is, and what my legal options are. And I need to know if Rachel's financial advisor friend is legitimate or if he's trying to scam her, and by extension, me. Of course, Marcus said, his voice shifting to a more professional tone. I'll look into everything right away. And Jason? For what it's worth, I believe Rachel thought she was acting in your best interest. She was absolutely beside herself when you were unconscious. We were all afraid you wouldn't make it. After hanging up with Marcus, I stared out the window at the gray January sky, contemplating my next steps. I needed to secure what remained of my assets. I needed to investigate this Gary Hoffman character. And eventually, I needed to have a very difficult conversation with my sister. But first, I had to focus on getting well enough to leave the hospital. Because one thing was becoming increasingly clear. While I'd been lying unconscious, fighting for my life, someone had seen an opportunity, and I wasn't entirely convinced it was just about a house. My suspicions were only reinforced when I received another email, this one from a real estate agent I'd never heard of, congratulating me on the successful sale of my property and inquiring if I might be interested in viewing some exclusive listings once I was recovered. How many people had been given my information? How many hands had been dipping into my finances while I was unable to protect myself? I opened my laptop again and began drafting emails to my contacts at the offshore banks. It was time to activate the contingency plans I'd put in place years ago, plans I'd hoped never to need. but was now grateful to have. Because if there's one thing I've learned in 15 years of investment banking, it's that when money is involved, you can never be too careful. Even with family. Especially with family. The next few days in the hospital passed in a blur of medical tests, physical therapy sessions, and clandestine financial maneuvers. Dr. Watkins was pleased with my physical recovery but concerned about my increasing agitation. "Your blood pressure is higher than I'd like," she remarked during morning rounds. "Are you following our stress management guidelines?" I forced a smile. "As much as possible under the circumstances." She gave me a knowing look. "The circumstances? Being that you're running some kind of financial war room from your hospital bed?" "Something like that," I admitted. "Just remember that all the money in the world won't matter if you end up back in the ICU." She made a note in my chart. "I'm authorizing your discharge for Friday, but only if your numbers improve, and you'll need someone to help you at home for at least the first week." Home. The word hit me like a physical blow. I no longer had a home. "I'll figure something out," I said, already mentally scrolling through options. A hotel, perhaps, or a short-term rental. Somewhere private where I could work without interruption. Dr. Watkins frowned. "Your sister offered to have you stay with her. She has a spare bedroom on the ground floor, which would be ideal given your current mobility limitations." The thought of staying with Rachel, of being dependent on her after what she'd done, made my jaw clench. "That won't be necessary." "Jason," Dr. Watkins said gently, "I understand you're upset with your sister, but isolated recovery isn't ideal. For cardiac patients, having support during this phase significantly improves outcomes." Before I could respond, my phone buzzed with an incoming call. Marcus Baldwin, my attorney. "I need to take this," I told Dr. Watkins, who nodded and moved on to her next patient. "Marcus," I answered once she'd left the room. "What have you found out?" "Quite a bit, actually," he replied, his voice carrying that measured tone he used when delivering complicated news. "I've reviewed all the documentation related to the house sale. Everything appears legally sound on paper. Rachel did rush the process, but the sale price was fair, above market value, actually." "And the money?" "That's where things get interesting. The proceeds were initially deposited into a joint account Rachel opened in both your names, presumably so she could access funds for your ongoing medical expenses. As of yesterday, approximately $720,000 remains in that account." I frowned. "So she hasn't given any to this Hoffman character yet?" "Not that I can see from the financial records. But here's what concerns me. I ran a background check on Gary Hoffman. Hoffman Investment Strategies is a real company, technically speaking. It's registered with the state, but it's less than 2 years old and has no significant assets under management. More importantly, Hoffman himself isn't a registered financial advisor. He was a real estate agent until his license was suspended 3 years ago following multiple consumer complaints. My suspicions crystallized into certainty. So he's running a scam. It appears that way, and from what I can gather, your sister's boyfriend, Steve Matthews, has brought several other clients to Hoffman in the past 6 months. There's no direct evidence of kickbacks, but the pattern is suspicious. Steve's involved in this? I pinched the bridge of my nose, feeling a headache building. Steve had always struck me as lazy rather than malicious, but perhaps I'd underestimated him. It seems likely. One more thing you should know. Rachel and Steve got engaged last month. The news hit me like another cardiac event. Engaged? She never mentioned. It was announced on social media about 3 weeks ago. Given everything else going on, I assumed you knew. I stared out the window, processing this new information. Rachel was planning to marry Steve, who had connections to a fraudulent financial advisor targeting vulnerable people. And this advisor now had his sights set on the proceeds from my house sale. Marcus, I need you to freeze that joint account. Immediately. Already done, he replied, confirming why I kept him on retainer. "I filed for an emergency injunction this morning, citing your medical incapacity at the time the account was created. No funds can be withdrawn until a judge reviews the case. I've also initiated the process to have your medical power of attorney revoked since you're now conscious and competent." "Thank you," I said, with genuine gratitude in my voice. "What about legal action against Hoffman?" "We have options there, but I'd suggest waiting until we gather more concrete evidence. If he's running a significant fraud operation, the SEC might be interested." After ending the call with Marcus, I resumed my research into Gary Hoffman. What I found only deepened my concerns. Beyond the suspended real estate license, he had a history of failed businesses, a bankruptcy 5 years ago, and a pattern of connections to investment schemes that disbanded just before complaints could result in legal action. It was painfully obvious what had happened. Steve had recognized my medical crisis as an opportunity, connecting Rachel with his associate Hoffman during her most vulnerable and desperate moments. They likely intended to funnel the house proceeds into some fraudulent investment scheme from which both Steve and Hoffman would profit, while my sister would be left explaining to me why my money had vanished. The betrayal cut deeper than I could have imagined. Not just Rachel's impulsive decision to sell my house, but the fact that she'd fallen in with people who saw my misfortune as their opportunity. People she was now planning to bind herself to through marriage. I was contemplating this bitter revelation when Rachel herself appeared in the doorway of my hospital room, carrying a small gift bag and wearing an uncertain smile. The nurse said, "You were awake," she said hesitantly. "Can I come in?" I nodded silently, studying my sister's face. She looked different somehow, more polished than her usual casual teacher style. Her hair was freshly highlighted, her nails professionally manicured, small changes that I might not have noticed if I weren't already suspicious. "I brought you something," she said, placing the gift bag on my bedside table. "Just some of your favorite snacks for when you feel up to eating normally again. The hospital food is still terrible, right?" I ignored the attempt at levity. "Why, didn't you tell me you're engaged?" Her hand flew to the diamond ring on her left hand, as if she'd forgotten it was there. "Oh, I was going to tell you, of course. It just didn't seem like the right time, with everything else going on." "Congratulations," I said flatly. "When's the wedding?" "We're thinking of June." She sat in the visitor's chair, her discomfort evident. "Jason, I know you're still upset about the house, but I hope you can be happy for me. Steve has really been my rock through all of this." "Has he?" I maintained, a neutral expression. "Tell me more about that, about how Steve has been supporting you." Relief washed over her face, clearly misinterpreting my question as genuine interest rather than fact-finding. "He's been amazing, truly. When the medical bills started piling up and I was so worried about you, he connected me with his friend, Gary, who helped me understand our options. Without them, I would have been completely lost trying to manage your finances." "Gary Hoffman," I said. "Yes, he emailed me about an investment opportunity. 18 to 22% returns, he promised." "Quite impressive." Rachel brightened. "It's an amazing opportunity, Jason. Gary explained it all to me. It's a property development in Tampa that's already broken ground. The developer just needs additional capital to complete the project, which is why the returns are so high for this final round of investors. I was thinking we could use some of the house proceeds to get in on it." "We?" I raised an eyebrow. "So you're investing in this too?" She shifted uncomfortably. "Well, not yet. Steve and I don't have the minimum investment amount, but Gary made an exception for us because we brought him such a valuable client. That's you," she added with an awkward laugh. "Very generous of him," I said, my voice deliberately neutral. "And the minimum investment is 500,000, she replied without hesitation. "But Jason, the projected returns would set you up so well for your recovery. You wouldn't have to rush back to work." $500,000. Nearly 3/4 of the remaining proceeds from my house sale. The pieces were falling into place with depressing clarity. Rachel, I said carefully, did you look into Gary Hoffman's background before taking his financial advice? Or did you just trust him because he's Steve's friend? Her expression hardened. What are you implying? I'm not implying anything. I'm asking a straightforward question about due diligence. Not everyone approaches relationships with the same paranoid scrutiny you do, she snapped. Some of us actually trust people. Trust should be earned, I countered, especially when it comes to financial matters. Did you know Hoffman's real estate license was suspended, or that he's not actually a registered financial advisor? Rachel's face flushed. That's not... Steve said Gary had some issues with competitors trying to smear his reputation, but his investment track record speaks for itself. And you've seen this track record? Documentation of past returns? Verified testimonials from clients? Her silence was enough. Rachel, I softened my tone, I think you've been misled. I don't know if Steve is being deceived as well or if he's actively involved, but this investment opportunity isn't legitimate. It's a scam designed to separate vulnerable people from their money. That's ridiculous, she protested, but uncertainty flickered in her eyes. Gary showed me the architectural plans, the location analysis. It's all real. I'm sure he did. Con artists are very good at creating convincing materials. But has anyone verified that the property exists? That permits have been issued? That the developer is legitimate? Rachel stood abruptly, her hands trembling slightly. You always do this. You always think you know better than everyone else. Not everyone is trying to cheat you, Jason. I've frozen the joint account, I said quietly. Her eyes widened. You what? The account with the house proceeds. My attorney filed an emergency injunction this morning. No money can be withdrawn until a judge reviews the case. You had no right, she exclaimed, echoing my own words from days earlier. That money is meant for your care, for your future. Exactly, I agreed. Which is why I'm protecting it from being funneled into a fraudulent investment scheme. Rachel snatched her purse from the floor, her movements jerky with anger. You don't trust anyone, do you? Not even your own sister. No wonder you're alone. The words stung, but I maintained my composure. I trusted you, Rachel. I trusted you with my medical decisions. I never anticipated you would sell my house without consulting any actual financial professionals. I did what I thought was best, she insisted, tears welling in her eyes. Everything I've done has been for you. I believe you think that's true, I said gently. Which is why I'm asking you to step back and consider the possibility that Steve and Gary Hoffman might not have your best interests, or mine, at heart. She shook her head stubbornly. Steve loves me. He wouldn't involve me in anything dishonest. Then prove me wrong, I challenged. Let's hire an independent financial investigator to review Hoffman's investment opportunity. If it's legitimate, I'll apologize and reconsider. We don't need to waste money on that. I trust Steve. This isn't about trust, Rachel. It's about verification. If you're so confident, there should be no harm in having an objective third party. Confirm what you already believe. She hesitated, doubt creeping into her expression. I need to go. I have papers to grade. After she left, I texted Marcus. Need a private investigator to look into Steve Matthews and his connection to Hoffman. Also, arrange for a serviced apartment near the hospital for my discharge on Friday. Then I turned my attention back to my offshore accounts. Over the next 2 hours, I executed a series of transfers that would consolidate certain assets and make others more accessible. I wasn't planning to reveal the full extent of my finances yet. That card would be played only, if absolutely necessary, but I wanted to be prepared for any scenario. By Wednesday afternoon, 2 days before my scheduled discharge, my plans were in place. The service department was booked and stocked with necessities. My most trusted colleague from Morgan Stanley had agreed to collect me from the hospital. Security measures had been implemented for my digital and financial assets. I was reviewing the latest report from the private investigator Marcus had hired when a notification popped up on my phone, an email from an unfamiliar address with the subject line, "Regarding Gary Hoffman, urgent." I opened it immediately. "Mr. Mitchell," tss, began. "You don't know me, but I'm reaching out because I believe we have a common problem. My name is Allison Parker. 9 months ago, my mother invested her entire retirement savings, $380,000, in a guaranteed high-yield opportunity with Gary Hoffman. The investment was supposedly for a medical office complex in Arizona. She was promised quarterly returns, beginning in June. Needless to say, no returns have materialized, and Mr. Hoffman has become increasingly difficult to reach. Through my own investigation, I've connected with 4 other victims who have lost money to Hoffman's schemes. We're building a case to present to the authorities, but we lack certain documents that would strengthen our position. I've learned, through a mutual acquaintance, that your sister has been in contact with Hoffman regarding a potential investment. I'm reaching out in hopes of preventing another family from experiencing what mine has. If you're willing to discuss this further, please contact me at the number below. Time may be of the essence. Sincerely, Allison Parker." I immediately forwarded the email to Marcus with a note. "Verify this person's identity and claims ASAP. If it's legitimate, set up a call." Within an hour, Marcus confirmed that Allison Parker was real and her story checked out. Her mother had indeed lost a significant sum to one of Hoffman's schemes, and there were police reports and bank records to support her claims. I called the number provided. "Ms. Parker, this is Jason Mitchell." "Mr. Mitchell, thank you for calling." Her voice was professional, controlled, but with an undercurrent of tension. "I wasn't sure if my email would reach you." "It did, and I'm very interested in what you have to say about Gary Hoffman. My attorney tells me you have documentation?" "Yes, extensive documentation. My background is in financial compliance, which is the only reason my mother's case has progressed as far as it has. Most of Hoffman's victims don't have the knowledge or resources to effectively pursue him." "How many victims are we talking about?" "That we know of? At least 12 across 3 different investment opportunities over the past 2 years. The total losses are approaching $2 million. I let out a low whistle. "And the authorities?" "Local police have taken reports but claim it's a civil matter since the victims technically signed investment agreements. The FBI has opened a preliminary file but says they need more evidence of interstate fraud. The SEC is interested, but similarly needs more documentation to proceed." "Which is where I might come in," I surmised. "Exactly. If you have communications from Hoffman about an investment opportunity, especially any materials he's provided, that could help establish a pattern of interstate wire fraud." "And if your sister hasn't yet invested—" "She hasn't," I confirmed. "I've frozen the funds she intended to use." "That's a relief," Allison said with genuine emotion. "My mother lost everything. At 73, she's now working part-time at a grocery store to supplement her Social Security." The story solidified my resolve. "Ms. Parker, I'm being discharged from the hospital on Friday. Could you meet with me and my attorney that afternoon? I want to see all your documentation and I'll share what I have." "Absolutely." "And Mr. Mitchell? There's something else you should know. In each case we've documented, Hoffman had a local partner who helped identify and groom potential victims. Someone who had the victim's trust and could make the initial introduction." "Like Steve Matthews," I said grimly. "If that's your connection to Hoffman, then yes. These partners typically receive a 15 to 20% finder's fee for each successful investment they bring in." After we arranged the details for Friday's meeting, I sat back in the hospital bed, processing this new information. If Allison was right, Steve stood to gain up to $100,000 if Rachel convinced me to invest $500,000 with Hoffman. The betrayal was no longer just about my house. It was a calculated scheme that had targeted me at my most vulnerable, using my sister's trust and concern as the access point. I picked up my phone again and dialed Rachel's number. It went straight to voicemail. "Rachel, it's Jason. We need to talk. I've just learned some disturbing information about Gary Hoffman that you need to hear. Please call me back as soon as possible. It's urgent." As I ended the call, Dr. Watkins entered for her evening rounds. She took one look at my face and frowned. "Your blood pressure is going to be through the roof again, isn't it?" she asked, reaching for the blood pressure cuff. "Probably," I admitted, "but this time it's justified." As she took my vitals, I made a decision. It was time to reveal at least some of my hidden assets, not just to secure my own future, but to protect Rachel from the consequences of her misplaced trust. Because despite everything, she was still my sister, the only family I had left, and family, as I was learning in the hardest possible way, was ultimately more valuable than any amount of money hidden in offshore accounts. Friday morning arrived with a sense of anticipation I hadn't felt since before, my heart attack. Today, I would leave the hospital, meet with Allison Parker, and begin reclaiming control of my life. Dr. Watkins conducted her final examination with characteristic thoroughness, reviewing my discharge instructions one last time. "The home health nurse will visit daily for the first week," she said, checking items off her list. "Cardiac rehab starts next Wednesday. I've already scheduled your initial assessment, and you have follow-up appointments with me every 2 weeks. For the next month." I nodded, only half listening as I mentally reviewed my own checklist of financial and legal matters requiring attention. Dr. Watkins snapped her fingers in front of my face. "Earth to Jason. This is important. Your heart literally stopped. Twice. You need to take your recovery seriously." "I am," I assured her. "Just multitasking," she sighed. "Your body can't multitask healing. Promise me you'll follow the recovery protocol." "I promise," I said, meaning it despite my other concerns. I had no desire to end up back in the hospital. "And thank you, Dr. Watkins, for everything." Her expression softened. "You're welcome. Now, who's picking you up? Your sister?" I shook my head. "A colleague from work. I'd tried calling Rachel multiple times since our last conversation, but she hadn't answered or returned my calls. I'd left increasingly urgent voicemails, but they too had gone unacknowledged. It was worrying, but not entirely surprising given how our last interaction had ended. At precisely noon, Daniel Weiss from Morgan Stanley arrived to collect me. A junior analyst I'd mentored over the past few years, Daniel was smart, discreet, and, most importantly, had no connection to Rachel or her fiancé. "The apartment is all set up," he reported as he wheeled me toward the exit. Hospital policy required that all discharged patients leave in wheelchairs, regardless of their ability to walk. Security system activated, groceries delivered, medical equipment installed, and your new phone and laptop are there too, as requested. "Excellent," I said, gratified by his efficiency. "Any messages?" "Your attorney called this morning. He said to tell you that the meeting with Ms. Parker is confirmed for 3 o'clock at his office, and he's arranged for a car to take you there directly from the apartment." Outside, the January air was brisk and invigorating after months in the climate-controlled hospital environment. I breathed deeply, enjoying the simple pleasure of fresh air. Daniel helped me into his Tesla, a purchase I'd advised him on last year when he received his first substantial bonus, and we set off for the serviced apartment in downtown White Plains, close to both the hospital and Marcus's law office. "Any word from Rachel?" Daniel asked cautiously. I'd briefed him on the situation when I'd called to ask for his help. "Nothing," I replied, watching the familiar streets pass by. It was strange to be back in the world after so long in a hospital bed, stranger still to be heading somewhere other than home. "I'm getting concerned," It's not like her to go silent for this long. Maybe she's just processing everything, Daniel suggested. Finding out your brother froze a joint account would be a shock. Maybe, I said, unconvinced. Or maybe Steve and Hoffman have convinced her I'm the enemy. The apartment was exactly what I needed. A clean, neutral space with minimal stairs, a hospital-grade bed in the bedroom, and a living area large enough to work in comfortably. Daniel helped me settle in, showed me where everything was, and then discreetly excused himself, promising to check in later. Alone for the first time outside the hospital, I took a moment to center myself. The path ahead was clear. Meet with Allison Parker, gather evidence against Hoffman and Steve, and protect both my assets and my sister. Then I could focus on my physical recovery and rebuilding my life without the Westchester house. I changed into fresh clothes, dress pants and a button-down shirt, more formal than the casual clothes I'd worn in the hospital, but less formal than my usual work attire. Looking presentable would help me feel more like myself, more in control. At 2:30, the doorbell rang. The car service, I assumed, though it was a bit early. I checked the security monitor by the door and was stunned to see Rachel's face on the screen. I hesitated only briefly before opening the door. She stood there looking tired and uncertain, a far cry from the polished appearance she'd presented at the hospital. "You didn't answer my calls," I said, stepping back to let her in. "I know." She entered cautiously, eyes darting around the apartment. I needed time to think, and to do some research of my own. "Research?" She nodded, slipping off her coat. "May I sit down?" I gestured to the living area. Of course. We sat facing each other, an uncomfortably formal arrangement for siblings, but appropriate given the circumstances. "I looked into Gary Hoffman," she said without preamble. "After you mentioned his license being suspended. You were right about that, and about him not being a registered financial advisor." "I see," I said neutrally, waiting for her to continue. "I confronted Steve about it." She twisted her engagement ring nervously. He claimed he didn't know that Gary had misrepresented himself, but I don't think Steve was being truthful. When I pressed him, he got defensive, then angry. A spark of alarm flared within me. "Did he threaten you?" "Not physically," she clarified quickly. "But he said some things. He implied that if I didn't stop creating problems, I might regret it. That we were so close to a big payday that would solve all our financial issues." My jaw tightened. "That sounds like a threat to me." "I think it was," she admitted, looking down at her hands. "It scared me. Enough that I packed a bag and went to stay with my friend Megan last night. Steve's been calling and texting constantly, but I haven't responded." A wave of protective anger washed over me. Whatever frustration I felt toward Rachel was overshadowed by my concern for her safety. "You did the right thing," I assured her, "both in researching Hoffman and in distancing yourself from Steve." She looked up, eyes wet with unshed tears. "I'm so sorry, Jason. About the house, about bringing these people into your life. I was trying to help, but I've made everything worse." "The house is just a building," I said, surprising myself with how much I meant it. "What matters is that you're safe, and that we prevent Hoffman and Steve from scamming anyone else." Rachel wiped at her eyes. "What do you mean?" I glanced at my watch. It was nearly time to leave for the meeting with Marcus and Allison Parker. "I'm meeting someone at 3 o'clock who can explain everything better than I can," I told her. "A woman named Allison Parker. Her mother was one of Hoffman's victims. Would you come with me?" She nodded without hesitation. "Yes. I want to understand what's really going on." The car arrived precisely on time, and the driver helped us both into the back seat. During the short ride to Marcus's office, I filled Rachel in on what Allison had shared with me: the pattern of fraud, the multiple victims, the ongoing investigations. "I feel so stupid," Rachel said quietly as we pulled up to the building. All the warning signs were there, but I was so desperate to find a solution for your medical bills that I ignored them. And then when Steve proposed, she shook her head. I wanted so badly to believe that everything was finally going right. I squeezed her hand gently. We all have blind spots when it comes to people we care about. Marcus met us in the lobby, his expression registering surprise at Rachel's presence. I hope it's okay that I brought my sister, I said. She's had a change of perspective. Marcus nodded, professional as always. Of course, Ms. Parker is already upstairs. She's brought quite a lot of documentation. In the conference room, Parker rose to greet us. She was younger than I'd expected, perhaps in her early 30s, with short brown hair and the alert, assessing gaze of someone who dealt with numbers and details for a living. Mr. Mitchell, she said, shaking my hand firmly. Thank you for meeting with me. And this is my sister, Rachel Mitchell, I introduced. She's been directly involved with Hoffman and his associate Steve Matthews. Understanding dawned in Allison's eyes. I see. Ms. Mitchell, I'm sorry you've been caught up in this. Rachel swallowed hard. I'm the one who should be apologizing. If I hadn't been so gullible— You're hardly alone, Allison interrupted kindly. Hoffman and his associates are very good at what they do. They target people during vulnerable moments when critical thinking is compromised by emotion. Marcus directed us to our seats and called the meeting to order. Ms. Parker has compiled evidence from multiple victims of Gary Hoffman's investment schemes. She's going to walk us through the pattern she's identified, and then we'll discuss how Rachel's experience fits in. For the next hour, Allison methodically presented her findings. She had spreadsheets tracking dates, amounts, and communications. Screenshots of promotional materials for 3 different exclusive investment opportunities that shared identical language despite supposedly being for properties in different states. Bank records showing money flowing into LLCs that dissolved within months. And most damning of all, a timeline correlating Hoffman's investment pitches with personal crises in his victims' lives, deaths, divorces, serious illnesses. It's predatory, Allison explained, her professional demeanor briefly cracking to reveal genuine anger. He specifically targets people when they're emotionally vulnerable, and he always works through someone the victim already trusts. A friend, a family member, a respected colleague. Like Steve, Rachel said softly, staring at the evidence laid out before us. Exactly, Allison confirmed. The local partner is critical to the scheme. They provide credibility and access that Hoffman couldn't achieve on his own. Marcus, who had been taking detailed notes, looked up. And you believe these partners are knowingly participating in the fraud? In most cases, yes, Allison replied, firmly. The pattern of commissions is too consistent to be coincidental. 15 to 20% of each investment amount is transferred to the partner within days of Hoffman receiving the funds. In my mother's case, her neighbor Jim, who introduced her to Hoffman, bought a new boat less than a week after she invested her retirement savings. Rachel paled visibly. Steve mentioned buying a new car last week. He said it was being financed through his dealership connections, but he may have been anticipating his commission from your brother's investment, Allison finished, gently. What happens to the money after it's invested? I asked, though I suspected I already knew the answer. Some of it goes to the partners as commissions. Some pays for Hoffman's lifestyle. He has a waterfront condo in Tampa and a vacation home in Colorado, both purchased in the last 18 months. The rest disappears, transferred through a series of shell companies until it's virtually untraceable. Marcus cleared his throat. Ms. Parker, with all this evidence, why haven't the authorities acted more decisively? Jurisdictional issues primarily, she explained. Hoffman operates across multiple states. His business is registered in Delaware. His bank accounts are in Florida. His victims are scattered across the country. Local police say it's a federal matter. The FBI needs evidence of intentional interstate fraud, not just bad investments. The SEC has limited resources and focuses on larger schemes. But with Rachel's testimony and documentation, I suggested, we might have enough to push them to act? Possibly, Allison agreed, especially if we can provide evidence of Steve's direct involvement as a partner. That would help establish the intentional nature of the fraud. Rachel straightened in her chair, a determined expression replacing her earlier shame. I have text messages and emails between Steve and Gary discussing my brother's situation. Steve was very explicit about the opportunity my brother's medical crisis presented. Her voice hardened. They were planning this while Jason was in a coma. A surge of pride cut through my anger. Despite her mistakes, Rachel was showing real courage now. Those messages could be crucial, Allison said, excitement creeping into her voice. Would you be willing to share them with us? And potentially, with federal investigators? Rachel nodded firmly. Yes, and I'm willing to testify if needed. I want to make this right. Marcus turned to me. Jason, given Rachel's cooperation and the new evidence, I'd like to propose a strategy. We continue with the injunction on the joint account to protect those assets, but we also work with Ms. Parker to build a case against Hoffman and Matthews. Your financial expertise could be invaluable in analyzing the investment materials they provided. I'm on board, I agreed immediately. But my first concern is Rachel's safety. If Steve suspects she's cooperating with us... I've already thought of that, Marcus said. The firm maintains a secure apartment for witnesses in sensitive cases. Rachel can stay there until this is resolved. It has excellent security and is not registered under the firm's name. Rachel looked surprised by the offer. That's very generous, but I can't impose... It's not an imposition, Marcus assured her. It's a standard precaution in cases like this, and it would give us peace of mind knowing you're safe while we build the case. After further discussion, we agreed on a plan. Rachel would move to the secure apartment that evening. She would provide all communications between herself, Steve, and Hoffman to Allison and Marcus. I would analyze the investment materials for specific misrepresentations that could strengthen the legal case. And on Monday, Marcus would arrange a meeting with FBI agents specialized in financial crimes. As we wrapped up the meeting, Rachel pulled me aside. I'm still having trouble believing Steve was using me like this. 3 years together, and it was all leading to this moment? Using my brother's medical crisis as a payday? People can hide their true nature for a long time, I said, remembering the many investment bankers I'd known who maintained perfect public personas while engaging in various unethical behaviors behind closed doors. But eventually, pressure reveals character. She nodded slowly. I guess my cardiac crisis was losing you. It made me desperate enough to ignore red flags I might have seen otherwise. We're going to fix this, I promised her. Together. After leaving Marcus's office, Rachel and I returned to my apartment to collect her things from her car and make arrangements for her to move into the secure location. As we gathered her overnight bag and a few additional items she'd brought, my phone rang. The caller ID showed an unfamiliar number with a Florida area code. I answered cautiously. Hello? Mr. Mitchell? A man's voice, smooth and confident. This is Gary Hoffman. I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time. I met Rachel's eyes, motioning for her to stay quiet. Not at all, Mr. Hoffman. I've been meaning to speak with you. Excellent. Your sister has told me so much about you. I understand you've had quite the health journey these past few months. That's one way to put it, I replied neutrally, putting the call on speaker so Rachel could hear. Well, I'm very glad to hear you're recovering, Hoffman continued, his voice oozing insincerity. I was hoping we might schedule a meeting to discuss the investment opportunity I shared with you via email. The response from other investors has been overwhelming, but I've held a spot for you out of respect for your sister and Steve. How thoughtful, I said dryly. When would you propose a meeting? The sooner the better, actually. These opportunities don't last long in the current market. I happen to be in New York this weekend. Perhaps tomorrow morning? Say 10 o'clock? I could come to you, given your recent discharge from the hospital. The audacity was almost impressive. He wanted to come to my location, presumably to assess my physical and mental state, to gauge how easy a mark I might be. That would be convenient, I agreed, watching Rachel's eyes widen in surprise. I'm staying at a serviced apartment in White Plains while I recover. Perfect. Text me the address, and I'll see you at 10 tomorrow. And Mr. Mitchell, I really do think this opportunity could be transformative for your financial future, especially given your current circumstances. I'm looking forward to hearing all about it, I said, ending the call before immediately dialing Marcus. He called me directly, I explained when Marcus answered. I want to meet tomorrow morning, I agreed. Marcus paused, considering. This could work in our favor. If we record the meeting, New York is a one-party consent state for recordings. We might capture him making fraudulent claims directly to you. Exactly what I was thinking, I confirmed. Plus, it keeps his focus on me rather than on Rachel's sudden disappearance. After finalizing the details with Marcus, I turned to Rachel, who had been listening to my side of the conversation with increasing concern. You're not actually going to meet with him alone, are you? She asked. No, I assured her. Marcus is arranging for a private investigator to be present, posing as a home health aide. Everything will be recorded, and the apartment has a panic button connected directly to security. It's a controlled environment. She still looked worried. What about Steve? If Hoffman is in town, Steve will likely be with him. It was a valid concern. All the more reason for you to move to the secure apartment tonight. Have you received any more messages from Steve today? She checked her phone. 3 calls and about a dozen texts, all asking where I am and when I'm coming home. He's getting increasingly demanding. Don't respond, I advised. Let him think you're still considering your options. Once you're safely at the secure apartment, you can turn off that phone entirely. Marcus is providing you with a new one for communications with us. As we finished, gathering her belongings, I noticed Rachel staring at her engagement ring, twisting it absently on her finger. You should probably leave that here, I suggested gently. It could be evidence. She slipped it off without hesitation, placing it on the kitchen counter. I feel like such a fool. Don't, I said firmly. You were targeted by professionals who exploit emotional vulnerability. What matters is that you recognize the truth and are helping stop them from hurting others. The security escort arrived to take Rachel to the secure apartment, and we said our goodbyes with a firm hug, the first real embrace we'd shared since before my heart attack. Be careful tomorrow, she whispered. Hoffman is dangerous. So am I replied with a grim smile. He just doesn't know it yet. After Rachel left, I spent the evening preparing for the meeting with Hoffman. I reviewed Allison's documentation again, memorizing key details about previous scams. I studied the investment prospectus Hoffman had sent me, identifying specific misrepresentations I could get him to verbally confirm. And I made one final set of arrangements involving my offshore accounts, a contingency plan I hoped wouldn't be necessary, but wanted in place nonetheless. By the time I went to bed, I was exhausted but resolute. Tomorrow will be a pivotal day. Not just in bringing Hoffman and Steve to justice, but in rebuilding my relationship with Rachel and reclaiming my life after months of unconsciousness and vulnerability. As I drifted off to sleep, I found myself thinking not about the house I'd lost or the money in my offshore accounts, but about the look of determination on Rachel's face when she'd offered to testify against the men who had manipulated her. Perhaps this crisis, painful as it had been, would ultimately strengthen the only family bond I had left. And that, I realized, would be worth more than any property or investment could ever be. Saturday morning dawned clear and cold. I woke early, my body still on hospital time despite the comfort of the apartment's adjustable bed. The home health nurse had visited the previous evening to check my vitals and review my medication schedule, but she wouldn't return until the afternoon. That left me alone to prepare for Hoffman's visit. Marcus had arranged for the private investigator, a former police detective named Michael Reeves, to arrive at 9, giving us an hour to set up recording equipment and review our strategy before Hoffman appeared. I showered and dressed carefully, choosing comfortable clothes that also suggested a man still in recovery. Loose-fitting khakis and a casual button-down, left partially unbuttoned to reveal the edge of my surgical scar. The more vulnerable I appeared, the more confident Hoffman would be. At precisely 9, the doorbell rang. Through the security monitor, I could see a stocky man in his 50s with salt and pepper hair, dressed in scrubs and carrying a medical bag. "Mr. Mitchell?" he asked when I opened the door. "I'm Michael Reeves, your home health aide for this morning." I ushered him in quickly, and once the door was closed, his demeanor shifted subtly from deferential healthcare worker to alert professional. "The apartment has been swept for surveillance devices," he informed me, opening his medical bag to reveal high-tech recording equipment. "We're clear. I'll set up audio and video now." As he worked, placing discrete cameras and microphones around the living area, we discussed the approach for Hoffman's visit. "The goal is to get him to make specific fraudulent claims on record," Michael explained. "Ideally, we want him to confirm the promised returns, the exclusivity of the offer, and specific details about the supposed development project. The more detailed his lies, the stronger the case." "And what about you? How will we explain your presence?" Michael smiled. "I'll be your nurse, monitoring your recovery. It provides a reason for my presence and supports the narrative that you're still vulnerable. I'll mostly stay in the background, but I'll interject occasionally to remind you to take it easy, check your blood pressure, that sort of thing." "Perfect," I nodded. "And you've coordinated with Marcus about the timing?" "Yes. Once we have what we need, you'll use the code phrase, 'I should discuss this with my financial advisor.' That's when I'll step in with a medical concern as a distraction, and you'll text Marcus. He has a team ready to move as soon as we give the signal." At 9:55, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "In the building. See you soon. Gary Hoffman." Michael and I exchanged glances. "Showtime," he said, adjusting his scrubs and picking up a blood pressure monitor from his bag. "Remember, let him do most of the talking. The more he volunteers, the better." The doorbell rang at exactly 10 o'clock. I took a deep breath, mentally shifting into the role of a vulnerable, recently discharged patient, grateful for financial assistance. Gary Hoffman was not what I had expected. Based on Allison's files, I'd imagined someone flashier, more obviously predatory. Instead, the man at my door was disarmingly ordinary, medium height, slightly overweight, with thinning brown hair and wire-rimmed glasses. He wore a conservative gray suit that looks expensive but not ostentatious and carried a leather portfolio under one arm. "Mr. Mitchell," he said warmly, extending his hand. "Gary Hoffman, it's a pleasure to finally meet you in person." His handshake was firm but not aggressive, his smile practiced but convincing. If I hadn't known better, I might have mistaken him for a legitimate financial professional. "Please come in," I said, deliberately moving slowly, as if still weak from my hospital stay. "And call me Jason." "Jason it is," he agreed amiably, entering the apartment and taking note of Michael, who was arranging medical supplies on the Sambori kitchen counter. "I see you have support for your recovery. That's excellent. Proper care is essential after such a serious health event." "This is Michael," I introduced myself. "He's monitoring my vitals and medications today." Michael nodded, professionally. "Mr. Mitchell needs to avoid stress and overexertion. I'll be checking his blood pressure periodically." Of course," Hoffman said smoothly. "We'll keep this brief and straightforward. No stress necessary." I gestured to the living area. "Shall we sit down?" Once settled, Hoffman wasted no time opening his portfolio and extracting several glossy documents. "I want to start by saying how sorry I am about your house. Rachel explained the situation to me, and I understand what a difficult decision that must have been. I adopted a regretful expression. It was a shock to wake up and find it sold, but Rachel assures me it was necessary. Unfortunately, medical emergencies often force tough financial choices, Hoffman said with practiced sympathy. The American healthcare system is unforgiving that way, but that's actually why I'm so passionate about helping people like yourself rebuild after such setbacks. Rachel mentioned something about a real estate development opportunity? Hoffman brightened, sliding a brochure across the coffee table. Exactly. This is the Palms at Harbor Heights, a luxury condominium development in Tampa Bay. It's a unique investment opportunity with significantly higher returns than traditional investments. I examined the brochure, which featured renderings of an upscale waterfront property with all the expected amenities: infinity pool, private marina, fitness center. The exact sort of aspirational imagery that would appeal to someone looking for financial recovery. It looks impressive, I said. What kind of returns are we talking about? That's the exciting part. Hoffman leaned forward eagerly. We're projecting 18-22% annually over the first 3 years, with potential for even higher returns as the Tampa market continues to explode. Those are remarkable numbers, I commented, making sure my tone conveyed impressed skepticism rather than outright disbelief. What makes this particular development able to generate such high returns when most real estate investments perform at much lower rates? It was a direct challenge to his claims, but delivered with genuine curiosity rather than confrontation. Hoffman didn't hesitate. 3 key factors, he replied confidently. First, location. We secured this waterfront property at below-market rates through a connection with the City Development Office. Second, timing. Tampa is the fastest-growing luxury market in Florida, right now, with demand far outpacing supply. And third, our structure. By raising the final 30% of capital through private investors like yourself, rather than institutional lenders, we can offer higher returns while maintaining control of the project. All plausible-sounding explanations that conveniently couldn't be easily verified. I noticed he hadn't mentioned any specific developers or construction companies by name. Who's the developer? I asked casually. Given my background in finance, I like to research the track records of the companies I invest with. A flicker of something, annoyance, concern, crossed Hoffman's face before his smile returned. The lead developer is Coastal Elite Properties. They've completed several successful projects in the Miami area. However, this partnership is through a special purpose entity called Tampa Harbor Development LLC, which includes several private investors alongside Coastal Elite. I made a mental note of the names, knowing they would either be fabricated or manipulated to complicate any verification attempts. And what stage is the project at currently? I pressed. Has construction begun? Yes, absolutely, Hoffman said, pulling out his phone. I have some recent photos from the site. Ground was broken 4 months ago, foundation work is complete, and vertical construction has begun on the first tower. He showed me several photos of a construction site that could have been anywhere, with cement mixers and the beginnings of a structure visible. There was nothing in the images that specifically identified the location or verified his claims. Very nice, I said, appearing impressed. And the minimum investment is $500,000, correct? That's what Rachel mentioned. That's right, Hoffman confirmed. It's a significant amount, I know, but it's the minimum participation level for this final funding round. We've already raised 70% of the required capital from institutional investors and early participants. And these early participants, I asked, have they received returns yet? Or is the project still in the pre-revenue phase? The first group of investors has already received their initial quarterly distributions, Hoffman claimed smoothly. In fact, they're seeing returns slightly above our projections due to stronger than expected pre-sales of the units. I nodded, thoughtfully, as if considering this information. That's encouraging. Would it be possible to speak with some of these early investors? I always find it helpful to hear about others' experiences. This was a direct challenge, and I watched carefully to see how he would respond. Hoffman's expression remained pleasant, but his eyes hardened slightly. I completely understand wanting references. Unfortunately, our investor agreements include confidentiality clauses that restrict direct introductions. It's a common practice in exclusive investment opportunities like this one. Of course, I said agreeably. Just thought I'd ask. Michael chose this moment to approach. Excuse me, Mr. Mitchell. It's time for your blood pressure check and medication. Can it wait a few minutes, Michael? Mr. Hoffman and I are discussing important business. I'm afraid not, sir. Doctor's orders were very specific about timing. I sighed, as if mildly inconvenienced. The joys of recovery. Mr. Hoffman, would you mind if we pause briefly? Not at all, Hoffman said graciously. Health comes first. As Michael wrapped the blood pressure cuff around my arm, I considered my next line of questioning. So far, Hoffman had made several verifiably false claims, specific return percentages, distributions to early investors, and construction progress. But I wanted more. Specifically, I wanted him to address the urgency and exclusivity aspects of the scam. Your blood pressure is elevated, Michael announced with a concerned expression. You need to stay calm, Mr. Mitchell. Remember what Dr. Watkins said about stress. I'm fine, I assured him, accepting a small paper cup with pills. Mr. Hoffman and I are just having a friendly discussion. Once Michael retreated to the kitchen area, I turned back to Hoffman. Sorry about that. Where were we? Yes, the investment opportunity. You mentioned in your email that this opportunity is time-sensitive. Why is that? Construction is proceeding on schedule, Hoffman explained, which means our funding deadlines are approaching. This final round of private investment closes next Friday. After that, any remaining units will be offered to the public at retail prices, which means the exceptional returns we're offering now won't be available. I see, I nodded. And what happens to my investment once I commit? What's the process? It's very straightforward, Hoffman said, extracting more documents from his portfolio. You'd transfer the funds to the project escrow account. We provide you with a detailed investment agreement and certificate of ownership in the Tampa Harbor Development LLC. Quarterly reports begin after the first full quarter, and distributions follow the same schedule once the property begins generating revenue. And the money remains in escrow until needed for construction? I asked innocently. Exactly, Hoffman confirmed without hesitation. It's released in carefully managed stages according to construction milestones, with full transparency to all investors. Another verifiable lie. According to Allison's documentation, investor funds were immediately transferred out of the supposed escrow accounts within days. That sounds very secure, I commented. So the $500,000 would be the total of my investment? No additional calls for capital down the line? No additional capital required, Hoffman assured me. The $500,000 is your complete investment amount. Of course, if the opportunity performs as expected and you wish to increase your position, that option may be available to select investors. I glanced at Michael, who gave a subtle nod. We had enough. Hoffman had made multiple specific fraudulent claims on record. This all sounds very promising, Mr. Hoffman, I said, shifting forward in my seat as if preparing to conclude our meeting. I should discuss this with my financial advisor before making a final decision, but I'm definitely interested. On cue, Michael stepped forward with an alarmed expression. Mr. Mitchell, your color doesn't look good. Let me check your pulse. As Michael made a show of checking my vitals with exaggerated concern, I discreetly texted Marcus. Got everything. Move now. Hoffman watched with mild annoyance as Michael fussed over me. Perhaps we should continue this another time, he suggested. Your health is clearly still fragile. I'm fine, I insisted, playing along with Michael's theatrics. Just need to rest a bit. How long will this opportunity be available? If I decide to move forward, what's the deadline? As I mentioned, our funding round closes next Friday, Hoffman said, gathering his materials. But given the interest we're seeing, I'd recommend making your decision by Wednesday at the latest to secure your position. I understand, I said. I'll be in touch early next week. As Hoffman prepared to leave, my phone buzzed with an incoming call. The screen showed Rachel's name, or rather, the new secure phone Marcus had provided her, saved under her contact. Excuse me, I need to take this, I said, answering the call. Rachel, what's wrong? Her voice came through clearly, intentionally loud enough for Hoffman to overhear. Jason, Steve just showed up at my friend Megan's apartment. He's demanding to see me, saying he knows I'm hiding there. Megan's trying to get rid of him, but he's making a scene in the hallway. I feigned shock and concern, watching Hoffman's reaction carefully. His expression remained neutral, but his posture stiffened slightly. Stay where you are, I instructed Rachel, following our prearranged script. I'll call the police. Don't engage with him. Ending the call, I turned to Hoffman with an apologetic expression. I'm sorry. There's a situation with my sister I need to handle. Her ex-fiancé is harassing her. Ex-fiancé? Hoffman repeated, genuine surprise evident. Steve? Rachel broke off the engagement? Yes, yesterday, I confirmed, observing his reaction. She discovered some concerning information about his financial activities. I'm sure you can understand why she'd be upset. Hoffman's facade of calm professionalism cracked slightly. I wasn't aware of any issues between them. Steve didn't mention... You know Steve well, then? I asked innocently. We've done business. Together occasionally, Hoffman said vaguely, clearly recalibrating his approach. Nothing extensive. Interesting, I remarked. Well, regardless, I need to handle this situation with my sister. I'll be in touch about the investment opportunity next week. Hoffman nodded, composing himself quickly. Of course. Family comes first. I'll look forward to hearing from you. As he turned to leave, the doorbell rang. Through the security monitor, I could see 2 men in suits standing in the hallway. Right on time. I opened the door to reveal Marcus and an austere-looking man with close-cropped gray hair and the unmistakable bearing of federal law enforcement. Jason, Marcus greeted me formally. This is Special Agent Thornton with the FBI. We need to speak with you urgently regarding a financial fraud investigation. Hoffman froze halfway to the door, his face paling visibly. Mr. Hoffman, Agent Thornton said, his tone shifting from polite to authoritative. What a fortunate coincidence. We were planning to visit you next. I don't understand, Hoffman said, his confident demeanor evaporating. What is this about? Gary Hoffman, Agent Thornton stated officially. We'd like to ask you some questions regarding Tampa Harbor Development LLC and several other investment entities you've established over the past 3 years. We have a warrant to search your hotel room and seize your electronic devices and financial records. Hoffman's eyes darted around the apartment, settling accusingly on me. What have you done? Protect myself and others from fraud, I replied calmly. The same way I protected my assets with offshore accounts you knew nothing about. His expression of shock was almost comical. Offshore accounts? What are you talking about? Did you really think I'd keep all my money in accounts my sister could access? I asked. I've been an investment banker for 15 years, Mr. Hoffman. Contingency planning is second nature to me. Agent Thornton stepped forward. Mr. Hoffman, please come with us. We can continue this conversation at our field office. As Hoffman was escorted out, protesting his innocence and demanding a lawyer, Marcus stayed behind to debrief me and Michael. That went perfectly, he said once we were alone. The recording is clear, and Hoffman made multiple fraudulent statements that directly contradict documentary evidence we already have. Agent Thornton will execute the search warrant on his hotel room immediately, and they're picking up Steve Matthews as we speak. What about Rachel? I asked. Is she safe? Completely, Marcus assured me. The call was part of our plan, remember? She's still at the secure apartment with one of our security personnel. The story about Steve showing up at her friend's place was fabricated to gauge Hoffman's reaction and establish his connection to Matthews. Relief washed over me. So what happens now? The FBI will process Hoffman and Matthews today. Given the evidence Allison Parker compiled, plus your recording and Rachel's testimony, they have enough to hold them while building the full case. It will take time for the full legal process to unfold, but the immediate threat is neutralized. Michael finished packing up his surveillance equipment. I'd say mission accomplished. You did well, Mr. Mitchell, especially for someone still recovering from major surgery. I smiled wryly. Turns out righteous indignation is quite energizing. After Marcus and Michael left, I called Rachel to give her the news. Her relief was palpable. So it's really over? She asked. They're both in custody? Yes, I confirmed. The FBI has them both. There will be statements to give, documents to review, possibly court appearances down the line, but the immediate danger is past. What about the money from the house? She asked, the question I knew had been weighing on her. Will you be able to get it back? The funds are secure in the frozen account, I assured her. Once the legal situation is clarified, we'll have full access again. But Rachel, we need to talk about my offshore accounts. What offshore accounts? She asked, confusion evident in her voice. I took a deep breath. It was time for complete honesty between us. I have significant assets and accounts outside the U.S. Legal accounts that I've always properly reported to the IRS, but accounts I never told you about. The house in Westchester represented only a small portion of my net worth. A long silence followed. So, you weren't financially devastated by the house sale? You weren't dependent on the proceeds? No, I admitted. I was upset about losing the house itself, the home I'd created, but not about the financial implications. I could have easily covered all my medical expenses without selling any assets. Another silence, longer this time. Why didn't you ever tell me about these accounts? It was the crucial question, the one that cut to the heart of our relationship issues. I think I never fully trusted that you would understand or respect my approach to financial security. After our parents died so suddenly, I became obsessed with planning for every contingency. Your more carefree attitude toward money always worries me. So you kept secrets instead of trying to help me understand, she said, a hint of hurt in her voice. Yes, I acknowledged. And that was wrong. If I had been more open, perhaps you wouldn't have felt so desperate when I was hospitalized. Perhaps you wouldn't have turned to Stephen Hoffman for guidance. We both made mistakes, Rachel said quietly. I should have consulted real financial professionals, not taken advice from Steve's friend. I should have been more careful with your home and your assets. Where do we go from here? I asked the question hanging between us. Forward, she replied simply. With more honesty and more trust. I'd like to understand your approach to finances better, and maybe you could try to understand why I've resisted it for so long. It was a reasonable request, a first step toward rebuilding our relationship on a more solid foundation. I'd like that, I said sincerely. And Rachel? Thank you for your courage today. Standing up to Steve and Hoffman, cooperating with the investigation. That couldn't have been easy. It wasn't, she admitted. But it was necessary. I couldn't let them keep hurting people. And I couldn't let them destroy what's left of our family. Family. Despite everything, that bond remained. Damaged but not broken, tested but ultimately strengthened by the crisis we'd endured together. As I ended the call, I gazed around the temporary apartment that had served as the stage for Hoffman's downfall. Soon, I would need to find a new permanent home, one that might never hold the same significance as the house in Westchester. But maybe that was okay. Maybe homes, like relationships, could be rebuilt, different but potentially stronger than before. One thing was certain. Whatever the future held, Rachel and I would face it with a new understanding of each other, and with the knowledge that some things, like family, were worth more than any house or offshore account could ever be. The weeks following Hoffman and Steve's arrests unfolded in a whirlwind of legal meetings, witness statements, and medical appointments. My recovery progressed steadily under Dr. Watkins' careful supervision, my strength returning incrementally with each passing day. By the end of February, I was cleared to begin limited work from home, though a full return to Morgan Stanley remained months away. In that time, the legal situation developed with surprising speed. The evidence against Hoffman was overwhelming, bolstered by documentation from previous victims, Rachel's testimony, and the recording from our meeting. Faced with the prospect of a lengthy federal trial and potential decades in prison, Hoffman began negotiating a plea deal within days of his arrest. Steve proved more problematic. Unlike Hoffman, who had a documented history of similar schemes, Steve maintained he was merely a middleman who believed the investment opportunities were legitimate. This position crumbled when the FBI discovered encrypted communications between the two men discussing marks and commissions, including specific references to my situation while I was still hospitalized. Marcus kept Rachel and me informed of each development, carefully managing our expectations about the legal process. We met in his office on a crisp March afternoon to discuss the latest updates. Hoffman has accepted a plea agreement, he announced as we settled into the comfortable chairs in his corner office overlooking downtown White Plains. 15 years, in federal prison, forfeiture of all assets, and full cooperation in identifying other participants in his schemes. Rachel exhaled audibly. That's a significant time. More than most white-collar criminals receive, Marcus agreed. The scope of the fraud and the number of victims were aggravating factors. Plus, targeting vulnerable individuals during personal crises demonstrated predatory intent that the prosecutors were eager to punish. And Steve? I asked, glancing at Rachel. We hadn't spoken his name much in recent weeks. Marcus consulted his notes. Still attempting to negotiate, but his position weakens daily as Hoffman provides more details about their partnership. The current offer is 8 years with possibility of parole after 5, plus restitution to victims. His attorney has until Friday to accept. Rachel nodded silently, her expression unreadable. The engagement ring that had once adorned her finger was now secured in an evidence locker at the FBI field office. Its purchase traced to funds stolen from an elderly victim in Phoenix. What about the other victims? She asked. Will they get their money back? Some of it, Marcus replied cautiously. The asset forfeiture will create a restitution fund, but Hoffman spent lavishly. The vacation homes, the cars, the private jet charters. There was significant dissipation of assets. Most victims will recover pennies on the dollar. The news was disappointing, but not surprising. Financial fraud rarely ended with full restitution, a reality I understood from my years in banking. And the house proceeds? I asked, though Marcus had already assured me multiple times that those funds were secure. The court has lifted the injunction on the joint account, he confirmed. The funds are available to you now. As we discussed, there are no legal impediments to you accessing the full amount. I exchanged a glance with Rachel, who gave a slight nod. We had discussed this topic extensively over the past month, working through initial tensions toward a resolution that acknowledged both the mistake of selling the house without my consent and the reality that the decision had been made with good intentions during extraordinary circumstances. I've decided to split the proceeds, I told Marcus. Half will go toward purchasing a new home for myself. The other half will be placed in a trust for Rachel, structured to provide income while protecting the principal. Marcus raised an eyebrow, slightly but made no comment on my decision. Rachel, however, shook her head. Jason, we've talked about this. I don't deserve half of your house proceeds. What I did was wrong, regardless of my intentions. It's not about deserving, I countered. Gently. It's about family, Mom and Dad would have wanted us to support each other. Besides, I'm not exactly destitute. I smiled, referring to my offshore accounts that had become a more open topic between us. Still, she insisted, I'd prefer a different arrangement. I've been thinking, what if we used part of the money to create a foundation? Something to help victims of financial fraud, especially those who've been targeted during health crises or other vulnerable periods. The suggestion caught me by surprise. A foundation? She nodded, warming to the idea as she spoke. We could partner with hospitals to provide financial education and support for families dealing with medical emergencies. Help them understand their options, connect them with legitimate advisors, warn them about common scams, all the things I wish someone had done for me when you were in the hospital. Marcus looked thoughtful. That's actually quite brilliant. It would transform a negative experience into something positive while addressing a genuine need. My firm would be interested in providing pro bono legal support for such an initiative. The concept resonated deeply. Throughout my career, I'd witnessed the vulnerability of people facing unexpected financial pressures, the desperation that could lead to poor decisions, the trust placed in the wrong hands, the devastating consequences that could follow. The Mitchell Family Foundation, I said, testing the name aloud. I like it. We could start with, say, a quarter of the proceeds and grow it over time with additional contributions. Rachel's face lit up with an enthusiasm I hadn't seen since before my heart attack. I could help run it. I'm taking a sabbatical from teaching. Next year anyway. This would give me a meaningful project to focus on while I figure out my next steps. The conversation shifted to logistics, with Marcus offering practical advice about establishing a nonprofit and Rachel suggesting potential hospital partners based on her connections through Steve's previous victims. As we talked, I felt a growing sense of purpose that had been absent since waking in the hospital to discover my house sold. After the meeting with Marcus, Rachel and I walked to a nearby cafe for lunch, an outing that represented significant progress in my recovery. The early spring air carried hints of warmth despite the lingering chill, mirroring the tentative renewal of our relationship. You're looking stronger, Rachel observed as we settled at an outdoor table, a concession to my lingering concerns about indoor dining during cold and flu season. Dr. Watkins must be pleased with your progress. She is, I confirmed, though she still reminds me at every appointment that I'm pushing too hard. Apparently, investment bankers make terrible patients. Rachel smiled. You've never been good at taking it slow. Even as a kid, you were always 3 steps ahead, planning and analyzing while the rest of us were just trying to enjoy the moment. There was no judgment in her tone, just observation. It was part of our new dynamic, acknowledging our differences without trying to change each other. Speaking of planning, I said, carefully unwrapping my sandwich, I've been researching properties. Nothing in Westchester. The prices have climbed even higher since my house sold. I'm looking at Connecticut, actually. More space, better value. Still a reasonable commute once I'm back in the office. Connecticut? Rachel looked surprised. That's quite a change. I thought you loved being close to the city. I did, I acknowledged. But priorities shift. The heart attack, the coma, everything that followed. It's clarified what matters. And being tied to a specific location isn't high on that list anymore. She studied my face. What is high on the list? I considered the question seriously. Security, but with purpose. Connection, to family, to meaningful work. And space, mental and physical, to recover fully and rebuild intentionally. That sounds healthy, she said approvingly. Very uninvestment banker-like. Don't tell my colleagues, I joked. They already think the heart medication has scrambled my brain. Last week, I suggested donating a portion of our year-end bonuses to financial literacy programs in underserved communities. You should have seen their faces. Rachel laughed, then grew more serious. Have you thought about what you want to do long-term? Will you go back to Morgan Stanley full-time? It was a question I'd been contemplating extensively during my recovery. I'm not sure. The firm has been incredibly supportive, offering flexible arrangements, reduced hours, whatever I need. But part of me wonders if it's time for something different. Like what? Teaching, perhaps, I said, surprising myself with the answer. The idea had been percolating in my subconscious, but hadn't fully formed until that moment. Financial ethics, responsible investment strategies, personal financial management, sharing what I've learned in ways that might help prevent situations like Hoffman's schemes. Rachel's eyes widened. That would be unexpected, but fitting somehow. It's just a thought, I qualified. One of many options I'm considering. Well, whatever you decide, she said warmly. I support you, just as you've supported me, even when I didn't deserve it. I reached across the table to squeeze her hand briefly. We're past that now. Forward, remember? After lunch, we walked to the parking garage where Rachel had left her car. She was returning to the apartment she'd leased after breaking the lease on the place she'd shared with Steve, a fresh start in a building with enhanced security and no painful memories. Before you go, I said as we approached her car, there's something I want to show you. I pulled out my phone and opened an email from my private banker in the Cayman Islands, turning the screen so Rachel could see it. What am I looking at? She asked, squinting at the document. I've added you as a signatory and beneficiary to one of my offshore accounts, I explained. Not with immediate access, but with emergency protocols in place. If anything happens to me again, any medical emergency or incapacity, you'll have clear instructions and proper authority to manage certain assets. No more guessing, no more desperate decisions under pressure. Rachel stared at the screen, then at me, her eyes filling with tears. Jason, I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything, I assured her. Just know that I trust you. Not blindly, but with proper information and guidelines. We're a family, and family supports each other, with boundaries and clarity. She hugged me tightly, careful of my still healing chest but conveying the depth of her emotions. Nonetheless, thank you for not giving up on me. Never, I promised. Besides, who else would put up with my financial lectures? As I watched her drive away, I felt a profound sense of peace that had been absent for months. The road ahead remained uncertain in many ways. My career direction, my new home, the full extent of my recovery. But the most important foundation had been restored. My phone buzzed with a text from Allison Parker. Court approved the victim restitution plan today. Mom's getting 42% of her investment back. Not everything, but enough to help her retire. Thank you again for your testimony. Small victories in a landscape of loss, but victories nonetheless. I texted back congratulations, then continued my walk toward the serviced apartment that had been my temporary home. The lease would end in 2 weeks, prompting decisions about next steps. Connecticut beckoned with promising properties, but I'd also received an interesting email from a former colleague who had transitioned to teaching at Columbia Business School. Guest lecturer position available for fall semester, he'd written. Focus on ethical financial practices. Limited schedule. Perfect for someone easing back into professional life after sabbatical. Thought of you immediately. The opportunity intrigued me. A way to test the teaching waters without fully committing to a career change. I'd arranged a meeting with the department chair for the following week, another step in the gradually expanding circle of my post-hospital life. As I entered the apartment building, I greeted the concierge by name. Jose, father of 3, working on his associate's degree in business administration. We'd developed a friendly rapport during my stay, often discussing his studies when he helped with my groceries or packages. Big envelope came for you, Mr. Mitchell, he said, retrieving it from behind the desk. Looks important. Government return address. I thanked him and took the envelope upstairs, recognizing the sender as the court handling Hoffman's case. Inside was official notification that my witness testimony would not be needed for trial due to Hoffman's plea agreement, along with formal acknowledgement of my cooperation in the investigation. The legal chapter was closing, allowing space for new beginnings. I placed the document in my growing Connecticut folder, part of the life I was methodically organizing for the next phase. My phone rang as I was sorting through real estate listings. Dr. Watkins's name appeared on the screen. "Jason," she said, warmly when I answered. "I just received your latest test results. Your cardiac function is improving steadily, better than expected at this stage, actually." "That's great news," I replied, genuinely pleased. "Does this change any of my restrictions?" "I'm cautiously upgrading your activity level," she confirmed. "Light exercise beyond walking is now approved. Stationary bike, gentle swimming, and I'm comfortable with you driving short distances, which I know has been frustrating for you. The newfound freedom would significantly enhance my home search capabilities." "Perfect timing," I told her. "I've been researching properties in Connecticut, and being able to drive myself to viewings will make the process much more efficient." "Connecticut?" she echoed, much as Rachel had earlier. "That's quite a change from your Westchester setup." "Everything's different now," I said simply. "Priorities shift after the kind of experience I've had." "That they do," she agreed. "I see it in many of my patients. The ones who embrace the change rather than fighting to restore exactly what was often find more satisfaction in their recovery." Her observation resonated with my own evolving perspective. I'm trying to view this as an opportunity rather than just a setback, a chance to reconsider what matters, what works, what needs to change. "That's a healthy approach," Dr. Watkins. Approved. "I'll see you next week for your scheduled appointment. Keep taking those medications exactly as prescribed, and call immediately if you experience any concerning symptoms." After we ended the call, I resumed my property research with renewed enthusiasm, marking several promising listings for in-person visits now that I had driving clearance. A classic colonial with modern updates in Greenwich, a contemporary with water views in Westport, a quirky converted barn in Ridgefield with space for a home office. Home. The concept had shifted dramatically since waking in the hospital to discover my house was sold. Initially, the loss had felt devastating, a violation of my autonomy, a theft of my carefully curated sanctuary. But as weeks passed and perspective expanded, I'd come to recognize that a house was ultimately just a structure. Home was something more fluid, more essential, a feeling of security, of belonging, of purpose. My phone buzzed again, this time with a text from Rachel. "Just got a call from the FBI. Steve took the plea deal. 7 years, no possibility of early parole. It's really over." I texted back immediately. "Closure is good. How are you feeling?" Her response came quickly. "Relieved, sad, ready to move forward. Working on a foundation proposal tonight. We'll send a draft tomorrow. The Mitchell Family Foundation. From crisis to purpose, from betrayal to collaboration." The symmetry felt right, a constructive response to destructive events. I sent a final text before returning to my property listings. "Proud of you. Talk tomorrow." As evening fell, I stood at the apartment window watching lights flicker on across the urban landscape. In one of those illuminated spaces, Rachel was drafting a proposal to help others avoid the trap she had nearly fallen into. In others, Hoffman's victims were processing the news of his plea deal, perhaps finding some small measure of peace in the knowledge that he couldn't harm others. And here, in this temporary space that had served as the stage for Hoffman's downfall, I was plotting a future different from anything I had envisioned before my heart stopped on that October afternoon. Life's contingencies couldn't all be planned for, no matter how many offshore accounts or backup strategies one created. Some crises would always arrive unexpectedly, testing resources and relationships in ways no spreadsheet could anticipate. The true security, I was learning, lay not in perfect preparation, but in resilience, the ability to adapt, to recalibrate, to find new paths forward when old ones disappeared. My sister had sold my house while I was in the hospital. She hadn't known about my secret offshore accounts. But in the end, what mattered wasn't the house or the money, but the relationship we were rebuilding, stronger, more honest, more resilient than before. As I turned from the window to begin preparing a simple dinner, I felt a sense of gratitude that surprised me given all that had happened. Grateful for my improving health, for Rachel's courage in facing her mistakes, for the opportunity to create something meaningful from our shared ordeal. Tomorrow, I will drive to Connecticut to view potential new homes. I would review Rachel's foundation proposal. I would continue my gradual return to professional engagement, exploring new possibilities along with familiar roles. The house in Westchester was gone, but home, the true essence of it, was still very much under construction. And for the first time since waking in that hospital bed, I was genuinely looking forward to what that home might become. The morning sun streamed through the wall of windows in my home office, casting a golden glow across the antique desk I'd found at an estate sale in Greenwich. Outside, the Connecticut landscape was ablaze with autumn colors, vibrant reds and oranges painting the hills that rolled down toward Long Island Sound. I paused in my lecture preparation to admire the view, still not quite accustomed to the beauty of my new surroundings even after 9 months in the house. The waterfront property in Westport had captured my heart the moment I'd toured it. A contemporary design with clean lines and open spaces, so different from my traditional colonial in Westchester, yet somehow exactly what I needed for this new chapter. The previous owners, a couple relocating to California for work, had been motivated sellers, allowing me to negotiate a price that, while still substantial, left enough of the house proceeds to fund our foundation's initial endowment. My laptop chimed with an incoming video call. Rachel, right on schedule for our weekly foundation meeting. I clicked to accept, and her face appeared on screen, framed by the exposed brick wall of her newly renovated apartment in Brooklyn. "Morning, Jason," she greeted me, coffee mug in hand. "Ready to review the Q3 numbers?" "All set," I confirmed, pulling up the spreadsheet we'd be discussing. "How was the community college workshop yesterday?" Her face brightened with enthusiasm. Incredible turnout. We had over 60 attendees, mostly nursing students who will eventually be working directly with patients during medical crises. The financial literacy curriculum we developed resonated strongly. Several instructors asked about implementing it permanently. The Mitchell Family Foundation had evolved significantly from our initial concept. What began as a modest effort to provide financial education for families experiencing medical emergencies had expanded to include partnerships with nursing programs, hospital social work departments, and community colleges across 3 states. Rachel had discovered a passion for curriculum development, combining her teaching background with painful firsthand experience to create programs that resonated with both professionals and vulnerable populations. "That's fantastic," I said, genuinely impressed with her accomplishments. "Any stories shared by attendees?" Story shares was our term for testimonials from people who had either narrowly avoided financial scams or fallen victim to them, a crucial element of our educational approach. Rachel nodded. One of the nursing instructors shared how her mother nearly invested her retirement in a silver investment opportunity while the instructor was undergoing cancer treatment. The pitch was eerily similar to Hoffman's approach: exclusivity, urgency, targeting during a family health crisis. But she didn't go through with it? Her accountant intervened, Rachel explained. Asked all the right questions, insisted on verification. Exactly the kind of professional guidance I should have sought when you were hospitalized. There was no self-recrimination in her tone now, just factual acknowledgement of a painful lesson learned and transformed into education. For others, We'd both grown significantly in our ability to discuss the past without reopening old wounds. That's a perfect segue into our first agenda item, I noted, shifting to the business at hand. The CPA Partnership Initiative. Marcus sent over the draft agreement yesterday. For the next hour, we worked through foundation matters efficiently, reviewing financial performance, discussing program expansions, planning the upcoming benefit dinner that would mark our first anniversary. Rachel had proven herself a capable and dedicated executive director, bringing her educator's perspective to the foundation's mission, while I contributed financial expertise and connections from my years in banking. As we concluded the call, Rachel hesitated, her expression shifting to something more personal. "Jason, there's something else I wanted to discuss, not foundation-related." "What's up?" She took a deep breath. "I've met someone. His name is Daniel Cooper. He's a financial counselor at New York Presbyterian. We connected through the hospital outreach program." "That's wonderful," I said, genuinely pleased. After the trauma with Steve, Rachel had understandably withdrawn from dating, focusing instead on healing and building our foundation. "How long have you been seeing him?" "About 2 months," she admitted. I wanted to be sure it was something real before mentioning it. "He knows everything, about Steve, about what happened with your house, all of it. He's been incredibly understanding." "I look forward to meeting him," I said warmly. "Perhaps at the benefit dinner next month?" She smiled, relief evident in her expression. "I was hoping you'd suggest that. He's actually helping develop the affordable financial counseling component for our hospital program. You two speak the same language." After we ended the call, I returned to preparing my guest lecture for Columbia Business School, where I'd been teaching a seminar on ethical financial practices for the past 2 semesters. The part-time teaching position had evolved from that initial guest lecturer opportunity, offering intellectual stimulation and purpose while accommodating my ongoing recovery needs. Morgan Stanley had been understanding about my decision to step back from full-time investment banking. I remained with the firm in an advisory capacity, working remotely with select long-term clients while gradually rebuilding my professional identity around education and ethical finance. A transition supported by both my offshore income and the perspective shift catalyzed by my health crisis. My phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Watkins. "Lab results look excellent. Clear improvement in all cardiac markers since last quarter. Whatever you're doing in Connecticut, keep it up." The bye message brought a smile to my face. My recovery had progressed steadily over the past year, exceeding expectations at each milestone. The combination of rigorous adherence to my medical regimen, reduced stress, and increased physical activity, swimming in my home pool, walking the beach path nearby, even occasional kayaking in the calmer months, had restored my health to a level I'd never anticipated during those dark days in the hospital. I texted back my thanks, adding, "Credit goes to the view. Hard to stay stressed looking at the sound every morning." Setting my phone aside, I glanced at the framed document hanging near my desk. The certificate establishing the Mitchell Family Foundation, dated exactly 11 months ago today. Beside, it hung a handwritten note from Allison Parker, whose mother had become one of our foundation's most compelling story sharers. "You turned a family tragedy into a lifeline for others. Thank you for making meaning from your pain." The sentiment captured precisely what both Rachel and I had tried to accomplish in the aftermath of Hoffman and Steve's betrayal. Rather than simply retreating to lick our wounds, Rachel into shame over her mistake, me into the security of my offshore accounts. We had channeled our experience into something constructive that might prevent others from falling into similar traps. My afternoon schedule included a conference call with the FBI's Financial Crimes Division, where I'd been serving as a volunteer consultant. Hoffman's case had opened doors to broader involvement in fraud prevention efforts, allowing me to apply my banking expertise to help identify emerging scam patterns. The quarterly briefings had become a fixture in my calendar, a commitment I, valued for its tangible impact. Before the call, I decided to take a short walk along the water, a habit that had become part of my daily routine. Stepping out onto the private path that wound from my property down to the shoreline, I breathed deeply of the salt-tinged air, savoring the physical freedom that had been unimaginable during my hospital confinement. The path was becoming familiar, yet never quite the same twice, changing with the tides, the weather, the seasons, much like life itself over the past year. As I walked, I reflected on the unexpected turns my journey had taken. The heart attack and extended coma that had left me vulnerable, the betrayal that had cost me my home, the confrontation that had brought down a fraud operation victimizing vulnerable families, the foundation born from that ordeal, now helping others avoid similar pitfalls, the new home, new career focus, new relationship with my sister, none of which I could have anticipated as I lay unconscious in that hospital bed. My phone buzzed again, this time a news alert. Financial advisor Gary Hoffman denied early release at first parole hearing. Board cites lack of genuine remorse and failure to acknowledge harm to victims. The notification triggered a complex mix of emotions. Not satisfaction, exactly. Hoffman's continued incarceration wouldn't restore the millions he'd stolen from victims, most of which remained unrecovered despite aggressive asset forfeiture efforts. Perhaps vindication was closer, confirmation that the system had worked, however imperfectly, to keep a predator from resuming his activities. Steve Matthews had fared no better at his recent hearing, by all accounts still insisting he had been an unwitting participant rather than a knowing accomplice. Rachel had declined to attend either hearing, preferring to focus her energy on helping potential victims rather than confronting past perpetrators. Her resilience continued to impress me, the way she had transformed betrayal and shame into purpose and action. Reaching the small wooden bench at my property's shoreline, I sat to watch the gentle waves lapping against the rocks below. In the distance, a sailboat cut across the horizon, its white sails bright against the blue autumn sky. The peacefulness of the scene contrasted sharply with the turmoil of the previous year, a visual reminder of how far I'd come. My phone rang, displaying Marcus Baldwin's number. "Jason," he greeted me when I answered. "Hope I'm not interrupting your waterfront contemplation." I smiled at his knowing reference to my daily habit. "Just the usual existential pondering." "What's up?" "Two things," he replied briskly. "First, the judge has approved the final victim restitution plan in the Hoffman case. The Foundation's Victim Support Fund will be able to distribute the matching grants next month as planned." This was welcome news. The Foundation had established a program to match recovered funds for Hoffman's victims, effectively doubling whatever meager percentage they received through the court process. "And second," Marcus continued, "I received a rather interesting inquiry from the Attorney General's office. They're establishing a task force focused on financial crimes targeting vulnerable populations, medical patients, elderly individuals, recent immigrants. They asked specifically about your potential involvement as an advisor, given your unique perspective as both a financial professional and someone who experienced this type of targeting firsthand." The opportunity aligned perfectly with the direction my life had taken. "I'm definitely interested. Send me the details?" "Already in your inbox," Marcus confirmed. "One more thing. Rachel mentioned you might be bringing a guest to the Foundation benefit next month. Anyone I know?" I chuckled at his transparent fishing for personal information. "Not yet, no, but yes, I am seeing someone, Dr. Eleanor Watkins." There was a momentary silence, then a laugh. "Your cardiologist? Isn't there some ethical guideline about that?" "Former cardiologist," I clarified. "She referred me to a colleague once our relationship began shifting toward the personal. It's still relatively new, but promising." Eleanor and I had reconnected at a medical conference where I'd been invited to speak about financial vulnerability during health crises. Our professional interaction had gradually evolved into friendship, then cautious courtship, both of us mindful of the complexities involved. At 52, she brought a grounded perspective and independent life that complemented rather than complicated my own. "Well, I look forward to seeing you both at the benefit," Marcus said warmly. "And Jason? It's good to hear you sounding so settled." After ending the call, I remained on the bench a while longer, contemplating Marcus's observation. Settled. Yes, that felt right. Not in the sense of compromising or accepting less than I deserved, but in the deeper meaning of finding solid ground after turbulence. The irony wasn't lost on me. For years, I'd pursued security through financial structures, offshore accounts, and contingency plans, convinced that control and preparation were the keys to stability. It had taken losing control completely, lying unconscious while others made decisions that fundamentally altered my life, to discover that true security came from something more flexible and resilient than any financial arrangement could provide. The foundation, my teaching role, my advisory work with fraud prevention efforts, my evolving relationship with Rachel, my new connection with Eleanor. My home is on the water. Each represented not a retreat to safety, but an intentional step toward meaningful engagement with life after nearly losing it. As the afternoon light began to shift, I rose to return to the house, my thoughts turning to the FBI call and the lecture, notes still awaiting completion. The path back seemed shorter somehow, the slight incline less taxing than it had been months earlier. Another small marker of physical recovery. Entering through the back door, I paused in the kitchen to pour a glass of water, glancing at the calendar hanging nearby. The anniversary of my heart attack was approaching, a date that would always carry complex associations, marking both the beginning of my medical crisis and the cascade of events that had transformed my life in its aftermath. Rachel had suggested a small gathering to mark the occasion, not a celebration exactly, but an acknowledgement of survival and growth. Eleanor had offered to host at her Central Park West apartment, a neutral space with medical help nearby should the emotional weight of the anniversary trigger any cardiac symptoms. The gesture typified her thoughtful approach to our relationship, always balancing professional insight with personal warmth. I sent a quick text confirming my attendance, then settled back at my desk to finish my lecture preparation. The topic: financial. Decision-making under duress, drew directly from my experiences, exploring how stress and crisis impact cognitive processes around money. The curriculum included case studies from Hoffman's victims, anonymized but powerful in their illustration of how predators exploit vulnerability. As I worked, an email notification appeared from Rachel. Foundation Quarterly Report attached for your review. Also, Daniel asked whether you play golf. Apparently, it's a prerequisite for financial professionals in his mind. I smiled at the normal, brotherly interaction, so different from our strained communications during and immediately after my hospitalization. Responding with good-natured ribbing about stereotypical banker hobbies, I attached the document she'd requested for an upcoming grant application. Our collaborative rhythm had evolved naturally over the months of foundation work, each of us contributing distinct strengths while respecting the other's domain. Rachel excelled at program development and community outreach, translating complex financial concepts into accessible education for vulnerable populations. I handled investment strategy and institutional partnerships, leveraging professional connections to expand our impact. Together, we'd built something neither could have, created alone, much like our parents would have wanted for their children. The thought brought a bittersweet pang, as it always did. They would have been devastated by the rift that had developed between us during my medical crisis, but proud of how we'd ultimately found our way back to each other, stronger for having weathered the storm. As evening approached, I completed my lecture notes and closed the laptop, mentally shifting from work to personal time. Eleanor would be arriving in an hour for our standing Friday dinner, a tradition we'd established once, My health permitted regular socializing. Sometimes we dined at local restaurants, but tonight I'd planned a simple meal at home, taking advantage of the late-season produce from a nearby farm stand, while preparing the ingredients, rinsing fresh greens, slicing heirloom tomatoes, marinating. Wild-caught salmon. I found myself reflecting on the ordinary pleasure of the task. A year ago, such domestic moments had seemed impossibly distant as I struggled with basic physical therapy exercises in the hospital, uncertain whether I would ever regain normal function, let alone build a new life. The doorbell rang just as I was setting the table on the deck overlooking the water. Eleanor stood on the porch, wind-blown and smiling, a bottle of wine in one hand and a small gift bag in the other. "Early congratulations," she said, kissing me lightly before handing me the bag. "For surviving your first-year post-cardiac event. Not all my patients manage it with such style." Inside the bag was a small crystal heart, elegantly simple. A somewhat obvious metaphor, she acknowledged with a self-deprecating smile. But it seemed appropriate. Strong but vulnerable, clear but complex, requiring proper care to maintain. Like relationships, like recovery, like the new life I'd built from the pieces of the old. We moved to the deck for dinner, the conversation flowing easily between professional topics and personal ones. Eleanor understood the medical aspects of my journey in ways few others could, while bringing her own perspective. As someone who regularly guided patients through life-altering health events, "I have news," she mentioned as we finished our meal, the sky darkening to indigo over the Sound. "I've been offered the department chair position at New York Presbyterian starting next spring." "Eleanor, that's wonderful," I said, genuinely pleased for her. "You've certainly earned it." She nodded, but seemed hesitant. "It would mean more administrative responsibilities, less direct patient care, and—" She paused, meeting my eyes directly. "It would complicate our current arrangement. The commute between here and the city would become more challenging with my expanded schedule." The implication hung between us, a crossroads approaching in our relationship, requiring decisions neither of us had felt pressured to make during the cautious early months of dating. "We'll figure it out," I said simply, reaching for her hand. "Across the table. I'm not tied to this location permanently. My teaching position at Columbia could expand. The foundation work can be managed from anywhere with a good internet connection." The future stretched before us, not with the rigid certainty I'd once craved, but with flexible possibility, options to explore together rather than contingencies to plan alone. As night fell completely, the automated lights along the shoreline path illuminated one by one, creating a gentle glow that mirrored the lights of distant homes across the Sound. We moved inside to the living room, where floor-to-ceiling windows maintained the connection to the water even in darkness. "It's beautiful here," Eleanor observed, not for the first time. "Peaceful in a way the city never manages." "It is," I agreed, though not where I ever expected to end up. "The best destinations rarely are," she replied thoughtfully. "At least in my experience." The observation resonated deeply. My carefully mapped life had veered dramatically off course, yet somehow arrived at a place more satisfying than the original destination. The house in Westchester was gone, sold without my consent during my most vulnerable moment. But this home, this life, was one I had chosen deliberately in the aftermath, with clearer purpose and broader perspective. My sister had sold my house while I was in the hospital. She hadn't known about my secret offshore accounts. The crisis had exposed weaknesses in our relationship, in my planning, in my understanding of what truly constituted security, but it had also created space for something new to emerge. A foundation helping others avoid similar pitfalls. A more authentic connection with my only sibling. A career shift toward meaningful education. A relationship based on mutual respect and understanding, and a home that represented not retreat, but intentional engagement with the life I'd nearly lost. As Eleanor and I settled into comfortable conversation about plans for the coming weekend, I felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over me, not despite the challenges of the past year, but because of them. The path had been painful, the losses real, the betrayals devastating, but the rebuilding had yielded something stronger, more authentic, and ultimately more valuable than what had been lost. Sometimes it seemed you had to lose a house to find a home. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads. Sister had sold my house while I was in the hospital. She hadn't known about my secret offshore accounts. The crisis had exposed weaknesses in our relationship, in my planning, in my understanding of what truly constituted security. But it had also created space for something new to emerge, a foundation helping others avoid similar pitfalls, a more authentic connection with my only sibling, a career shift toward meaningful education, a relationship based on mutual respect and understanding, and a home that represented not retreat, but intentional engagement with the life I'd nearly lost. As Eleanor and I settled into comfortable conversation about plans for the coming weekend, I felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over me, not despite the challenges of the past year, but because of them. The path had been painful, the losses real, the betrayals devastating, but the rebuilding had yielded something stronger, more authentic, and ultimately more valuable than what had been lost. Sometimes it seemed you had to lose a house to find a home. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.